You are living in the most dangerous time in American history.
We won't take a single back step.
Former professional basketball player is now the Republican Party's choice.
Can you imagine Royce White, the U.S. Senate?
White won the endorsement on May 18th with 67% of the vote.
There's nothing that guarantees we win, but I guarantee you if we lose, we will die. Good evening. Welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio, powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody, you might as well buy them from us. Help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And today we have another incredible family and friends guest episode. I guess we're saying it's a guest episode. Really, it's the preview to the Last Renaissance podcast, which we're still in the stages of working out all the technical aspects of the Last Renaissance podcast and YouTube channel. The great AJ Barker is in the studio today. AJ, welcome back, brother. It's a pleasure to have you again.
As always, honored to be here.
Yeah,
love talking to you.
I'm pretty sure we're being shadow banned on YouTube, which doesn't surprise me. Good for us. We show the podcast on a number of platforms. X, we show it on Rumble, and we show it on War Room's Getter page, which gets 25, 30,000 views a night. On their Rumble page, it gets 50, 60, 70,000 views a night. So the podcast is getting around, which I know for a fact because when I'm out on the trail, campaign trail, going to these different Republican BPOU events and other political events, I always get people who say, I love the podcast. I've been listening to the podcast. I've been listening to podcasts since it started for 2 years. I was in, where was I at? I was in, down in CD1, which is, would have been, forget which high school exactly we were at. But anyway, somebody down in CD1 came up to me and said, I've been watching the podcast for a year and a half. So we know it's getting out and around. The numbers may not reflect it, but that's kind of meant to discourage people who tell the truth like we do anyway. And there's a level of it where I look at podcasts, and I only say this as a preface to the Last Renaissance and being very careful about how the YouTube channel gets going to avoid being shadow banned and things like that, because I think there is some technical, kind of things you can do when it comes to how you post content, when you post content, the titles that you use, all of it plays a factor, right? Which shouldn't shock us because it's big tech. But part of it is there are people who even the algorithm likes that the establishment says they don't like, if that makes sense. And I guess at the highest level of what you would call opposition-controlled opposition, and I'm not going to say names because I'm not certain that these people are controlled opposition. I'm just saying it is strange even to see who the algorithm has let to start to let come through, right? And I mean on the conservative side of things, right? And if I really took a fine-tooth comb to what they're doing, or let's say their conversation versus a conversation like ours, or having a guest on like you, it's usually that some of their rhetoric is in some way polarized to a certain niche of the conversation that's intended to be dramatic, theatrical, or exaggerated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To keep the focus off the center of the issue. And we make it seem like the center of the issues are so difficult, but really I'm not in agreement. I think things are much simpler than we make them in many respects. So with that being said, the Last Renaissance will get up when we get a good grasp on what's going on. I'm using my own channel and the Free People Radio channel as sort of a pilot to try and figure out what's going on with the algorithm. So the Last Renaissance channel will be coming, and when it rolls out, it'll have many of the bells and whistles that you would readily see with the YouTube channel, and then you'll find our podcast there. For now, we got the great AJ Barker on Please Call Me Crazy. Again, welcome back, sir. And let's get right into it.
Yeah, let me throw one
Okay.
in. I
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
was thinking as you were saying all that, I think one of the biggest reveals, from that little the Doge program, Elon Musk, was the funneling of federal funds to, these NGOs, but then also these like media
Oh,
operations
man.
where it was like, you might know the number more specifically, but it was millions or hundreds of millions or billions of dollars that were
Yeah.
being funneled into subscriptions
50 billion.
toward like actual regular newspaper or media outlets, organizations.
Individuals.
Yeah, yeah.
I think now they found that Whoopi Goldberg got $6 million to promote diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm not certain on that, so don't quote me.
Sure.
But obviously Whoopi's a big voice and a big character in the mainstream media, and with all of these accusations being thrown around, her name I saw pop up, and if that ends up being true, it wouldn't be shocking at all.
Yeah.
Not that everybody who
Well-
you see talking like that is getting paid, but it certainly speaks to a huge
Sort of artificial.
what do you call astroturf?
Yes,
Yeah,
an
astroturf.
artificial representation of this. And it's like, I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, think about it like this, right? You funnel $50 billion toward these projects. What are they going to be able to do with that $50 billion? It's not just that they say we have this number of viewers, which they do.
Right.
So first off, they say that their number of viewers are this.
Which people are susceptible to.
Yep, which people are susceptible to. But then also on top of that, think about it. Think about the technicians that you can afford to employ and all the technical side of things. And we as humans, we're naturally drawn to these sort of spectacles of beauty, of, just sort of futuristic technological things,
Yes.
right? We naturally gravitate toward it. And anyone who has a young kid knows it. It's like you put a screen in front of them and they're like hypnotized
Yes.
immediately. So now you have these billions of dollars being funneled, and it's like even just the level of production value
Yeah.
that they can create will draw X amount of attention.
A good example of this, and I'm a huge fan of the Marvel universe. Some of the new Marvel movies that they've created, I think it is a modern Marvel, no pun intended, of technology and cinematography and things. What
CGI,
what they've created is incredible. But with that being said, you always hear people who are old fans of Marvel comics, the actual comics, that the movies don't capture something. Now, part of that is the human imagination. When you read a book or you read something, the human imagination can do things that even the best CGI and writers can't do. And that's just kind of a gap there between. But they get pretty close, and then they're doing a damn good job not knocking on. But what I'm saying is, when you put technology in front of people, we're drawn to it in a way where we're even willing to forego the substance in many ways, which
absolutely.
is the whole modern reality TV sort of landscape. I'm not talking about the high-level motion pictures because they put so much money in them, it actually comes close to something good. Yeah. But just the reality TV and how accessible it is, people are totally willing to forego substance to be hypnotized and kind of distracted on an ongoing basis.
And that's what I mean by this is like, it's really insidious that they were funneling this money through NGOs, through these sort of peripheral, sort of these sort of parallel operations. They were funneling money into these things, which are narrative generating operations. That's what those companies are doing. That's what that business is doing, is generating narrative. And they funneled so much money into these things. It has an effect on people. And then on the flip side, right, they'll just squash other ones so that even if someone does it, you feel like you're totally on the outside thinking about it. And that, right, that sort of social perception that we have of ourselves in relation to other people is really strong in us. It's really strong, and it can move a lot of things. One of the things we'll talk about throughout this conversation, we talk about a lot, is the role that fear has in dictating behavior. And one of the most profound things is the amount of times that be not afraid is mentioned, particularly in the New Testament. Mm-hmm. Is there in the Old Testament, the prophets too, as well, big time. But then it just explodes on the scene in the New Testament. Be not afraid. Mary, do not be afraid. Joseph, do not fear. Right? The letter of John, first letter of John, perfect love casts out all fear. Right? Christ dies. He's persecuted, and then he goes through his passion. He's crucified. He's literally killed. Well, what is that to do? It's to say, be not afraid.
Mm.
Be not afraid of those things that we're afraid of, right? Which are, one, I mean, we're afraid of disease and illness. Look at how the medical industry is capitalized on that.
Keep
and
going. Yes.
now we have runaway, insurance schemes going on. Right. So we're afraid of death, of illness. We're afraid of social persecution or ostracization. We're afraid of rejection. We're afraid of abandonment. We're afraid, ultimately we're afraid of poverty, of hunger, of death. I mean, you think about all these different aspects under which we can be afraid. And now you look at the lens of Christ's story, or even if we're going to be really generous up front, you go look at the other great historical figures. The Buddha, what's compelling about the Buddha is that he forgoes all of it. He's a rich prince and he forgoes all of it to try and break himself from those attachments. Well, what's the source of those attachments? It's fears under different aspects, right? And where we say what's profound about the Christian witness vis-a-vis the Buddhist testimony or witness is that Christ even takes on this death, this shameful, persecutory, evil, wicked death. And so it's like, it's another sphere still of trying to break the bonds of those fears. How good and gracious a God we have, that he's like, no, I know how much fear captivates you, and I desire to break all of it, to free you from all of it. But, that is a little segue, but it's like, but think about it, right? What do? They condense the numbers. They inflate the numbers over here. Why is it? Because this moves our fears. And then that directs behavior. And even if it may be that, liberalism isn't intrinsically compelling, they don't really care, because the operations, the activities that we do flow from that sort of mindset.
Right.
So, I mean,
yeah,
we probably just leave it at that. Podcast over, right?
Podcast over. That's it, guys. No, we're going to wrap up. No.
yeah. Good night, right?
Yeah. No,
but that's the whole challenge in this life, is those fears, and how do we break them? I mean, you've been, slandered, accosted, rebuked publicly more than, most, you're 33. I know we're both soon to be 34, and it's like, and you've taken on more than most people will in 70 or 80 years of life. And it's hard. It's not easy. Right. But you see how that happens and how the doors close in around you. You've been canceled or attempted to be canceled. I've been the same. I'm going to get canceled again in the future. It's going to keep coming. And it's hard and it's scary, but it's like, that's the whole message of the Christian witness, of the Christian message. And it's the same message of Moses to the Israelites, which of course I consider part of the Christian message. But even if you go to Judaism, it's the same message, right? And you go to Buddhism, it's the same message. It's those fears. How do we navigate life not being moved by that?
Yeah.
Right? We'll go right back to first letter of John. Perfect love casts out all fear. Doesn't cast out hate, casts out fear. That's profound. But those are the levels they're playing at. Those are the levels they're pulling at.
Yeah.
For all of us. Okay, yeah, we came at you once, but we'll come at you again. We'll hit the next thing.
War of attrition.
Yeah. It's tough.
And their ability to double down on a narrative that would seemingly be, unappealing on face value is noteworthy. I mean, it's worthy of real respect, at least. I mean, you got to respect your enemies.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's formidable, right?
It's formidable.
If nothing else, it's super formidable.
I mean, they have proven that where on face value, if you got 100 people in a room and you asked them what they thought about, say, a scene from a reality TV show, or some, a political commentator who's saying some salacious thing about some issue, people in that room could say what they want. Now, you might get a few rooms where people would just come right out and say how ridiculous they really believe. But on face value, you'll get people in conversation, in dialogue, that will go, well, this is ridiculous, but they can't take their eyes off it.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is just such an important part of what we have to fight through right now in the technological age, and certainly our children.
Yeah.
I mean, our children are even more susceptible. I don't know who's more susceptible, the children or the adults, but just in general, on principle, you would think that the children are in need of more consideration and protection. Speaking of,
What?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, but one question I have tee up your way,
Mhm.
because I'd love to hear your response. I think we all have different people or things people we look up to.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are going to be, dead or long past, right? I believe Christ still lives, but his time where he was walking the earth was, 2,000 years ago, long past. And then we got saints and different things. But most of us, we have some people in this world where we're like, okay, I kind of like the energy about that person or this sort of thing. My question for you is, in those people that you look up to, what about them inspires you most? Right? If you just think of the mentors or individuals, and maybe we can even go to recent past people. So like if they were a 20th century figure, something like that. So maybe they've passed, but like what in their example of living like inspires you? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I always follow in the Christian tradition, I guess, and I judge people heavily based on the amount of self-sacrifice they endure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of my own framework for, uh, you know, assessing people's character.
Yeah. Yeah.
How much, and not just, because hardship befalls people naturally sometimes,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
one thing, but how much
Voluntarily.
that you take on is a good sign of your character. Like Muhammad Ali is a great example. And obviously right there during his time and next to him in many ways, a close personal friend would have been Malcolm X.
Yeah.
It's another great example. Steve Bannon.
Yeah. What about Steve?
Donald Trump.
What do you, what?
Isn't that a crazy four figures to put together?
No,
Muhammad Ali, Trump, Bannon, and Malcolm X.
But think about those latter two, Trump, Bannon, like, you done publicly, you talk about critiques of Trump and other things. So we're not talking about everything that you like, but like what inspires you by him? You know what I mean? Like
to add on to it, I guess what's really inspiring, you could say most about Trump, but also about Bannon. Bannon's a little bit different. Bannon's a philosopher. So when you listen to Bannon, you have to have a certain level, or at least I do have a certain level of respect for his knowledge and his ability to command history and sort of his intuition towards bridging things for an audience, and to the point where even when I listen to it myself, I'm like, damn, that was good, and I'm somebody who people say can do it too. But even when I do it, I'll tune in the band and I'll be like, damn, that dude's going off, you know what I mean? He was hitting on that one. But Trump is more his ability to take scrutiny.
Yeah.
That's inspiring. His ability to stand in the fire against all odds and not only take the scrutiny, but sort of have a level of, I don't want to say apathy about his own flaws, but certainly a certain,
like a willingness to keep going.
A pragmatic sort of practicality to his own shortcomings. Like, okay, like in the famous line is obviously Hillary Clinton saying, hey, you didn't pay any taxes. And he goes, well, neither did any of your donors. And I don't look at that as like a tit for tat or to try and cast blame. That's him going, okay, if in fact you believe that I've done something that's unethical or immoral in your opinion by, using tax loops, then I'll own that. Fine.
Yeah.
And it's some people would take that as arrogant. Yeah, but some people take that as arrogant on face value. Like he's basically saying, so what, I use a tax loop. But there is a level, I mean, and I would say this is a pendulum as a side note. This is a pendulum that man faces, is how much self-doubt and self-scrutiny and sort of self-pity and self-loathing is appropriate in the fallen nature of man. And then how much of, hey, okay, like in an athlete sort of way, okay, yeah, I missed that shot, but I got to still keep playing.
Yeah.
Because if I wallow in this miss right here, I'm going to miss the whole game. Can't do that. And
Yep.
that's a very, very thin line in some respects. And Donald Trump does a great job, at least in our time, of going, you know what, I've had flaws, I got kids from multiple marriages, and some woman could said this, and, okay, I wasn't there, but, I've said things about women, with locker room talk, and he just like, but we're going to keep rolling. We're going to keep
Yeah.
going. There's other things to do, and I'm not going to let my own flaws be so heavy in my own mind that they paralyze me. That's
Yeah.
another form of fear,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
The fear of your own sort of shame of your own actions, you
And
could say.
in one sense, right, the saints will say that it belies a mistrust in God and his mercy. Now, I think it's important that you come to God to ask for his mercy, right? I've had people ask this, well, where's, if God holds us to account for our sins, where's the mercy in that? Well, think about it like this. That model is this idea that sin doesn't like cause any real damage, that it's just like a random notion. So why doesn't he just like get rid of it, right? But if we think of sin as something where it creates damage, it creates a real wound, a real injury, a real defect now, let's say, God's mercy would have to be correcting that defect. It wouldn't be enough for him to be like, whatever, cool, I won't hold it against you, but now you're still like limping along. He'd be like, no, yeah, I got you. Like, I'm going to fix that. Okay. So what does that practically look like? Well, sin springs from the will, from the things we desire and the things we choose, that we ourselves choose. We have that free will. So if he's going to heal it, part of what he's going to do, and this is St. Augustine says it, but the prophet Jeremiah says it. He says, turn me, Lord, and I will be turned. Right? So he's saying, all right, God, I'm going to need you to start this so that I can now actually be turned. Think about that. I think it's a beautiful thing about the sacrament of confession, but the church has always held that it's a grace for one to even go to confession, that God has to first move you to even want to go there in the first place. Because what's his mercy doing? It's trying to heal the source of the problem. If the problem is your will, then there's going to have to be some form of participation with God in it.
That starts it off, yeah.
Yeah, that starts it. You're going to have to, if the error springs from how you approach things, he's going to have to heal how you approach things. So if you stay outside of it, not wanting to come to it, it's not like we can sit there and go, well, I guess maybe God could be more merciful if he just did it regardless of whether you came to him or not. We can go, well, no, that's actually not the case, because the thing that has to be healed is how you come toward things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
Profound.
Again, it's one of those where it's like, yeah, I forgot where that.
Well, let's stay right. I want to stay right there anyway,
yeah.
because before the podcast started,
let me throw one more thing in though. That's a side thing. Circling back to the inspiration, what you find. Oh, that's what we were talking about.
Yeah,
was Trump. You right, and the people who won't keep going, it belies actually a lack of trust in God's mercy, and that's why I had the side tangent about confession. That mercy should also be us rightly asking God for his mercy, for the things, so that he can correct the source of it, which is how we approach toward things. But there is something, very recognizable in the strength of a person who continues just next thing up. The athlete's a great image for it.
Yeah.
The one who sits there and gets eaten up over their faults is not as good as the one who has the faults but keeps going. Let's think of like Hall of Famer Brett Favre, who's amazing, right? It's like, he'll just keep going. He'll keep going. Whereas another quarterback will throw 15 interceptions, 20 interceptions in a season and be demoralized. And they won't think they have something great to contribute. Whereas Brett Favre will throw 22 and he's like, and I'm going to win the MVP next year. Or whatever. We're grinding. Trump has that piece. And what's interesting is you do have this real dynamic that maps onto scripture, tradition, philosophy, which is courage, the virtue of courage, which is the ability to take on difficult things, is way closer to attacking all the time than it is not at all. So we say that the middle ground is not the mathematical middle ground. It's the rational middle ground. It's which one has to actually be closer for you to achieve that thing. And courage, by the way, temperance has to actually be closer. Temperance actually means to temper a thing, to restrain it. And that's things that are easily desirable. things that you can have easily. We have to be way closer to not doing them than we are toward like, oh, I'm going to find this balance of how I do it. Like we have to be way closer to not doing it. Courage is the other end of it. We have to be the ones where people are like, oh man, I think you should back off doing that. And it's like, the only way to develop courage is to keep attacking.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, but that's literally the only way it works.
This I have very personal experience with even right now and running for office. Right?
Yeah.
It's just people would say, and it was so weird to me and this is where I get the instinct around how prevalent self-doubt is in our society is one of the common comments that I would receive from the liberal or Democrat opposition online was something like, you're going to get killed by Amy Klobuchar. Why would you even run?
Sure.
Why would you run? You're going to get smoked. You're going to get defeated in epic fashion. I actually end up doing better than anybody else in history. And it's a testament that having that courage allows you to do better usually than others, but still coming up short. And their whole mentality is something like, if I'm not going to succeed, if I don't know I'm going to succeed, then why would I do it? Yeah. This maps onto, this is actually the substrate of people's lack of faith. If I don't know I'm going to get to heaven for sure, then why have the faith?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a microcosm that I'm using, a crude sort of microcosm. But when they say
it's good. I mean,
why would you run for office if you don't know you're going to be elected? It's like, well, why would I have faith in God if I don't know I'm going to make it to heaven?
Yeah,
they can't bridge that gap. And even some who say that they're conservative and Republican and even MAGA, they have problems bridging that gap too. They still want to do this sort of technical mathematic, like you said, not the mathematic mean, but the rational mean. They still want to try and make it a math equation.
Yeah.
Well, the numbers say.
Yeah.
So who cares what the numbers say, dude? You're not.
Yeah. The other thing is, I mean, the other thing that's I think a true expression of humility, and I mean this, is recognizing that I may bring this so far, and the rewards of the glory may never come my way in this life, but me bringing it to that point might springboard the one who God has determined before all time to bring it to glory. Right? So again, it's like you're running against odds. I mean, I'm starting up a school, and that's a momentous a challenge. That's something that most people are not going to try and do. And not only that, if they do try and do it, they'll try and do it in a way that feels most secure to the blueprint that's already laid,
right,
so that they can have the easiest, what they perceive to be the easiest comfort level with the people who they'd want to become a part of their school, right? It's like they want to be amongst all the blips on the radar, they want to be another blip in the radar.
Yeah.
And I think that the more natural instinct towards starting a thing up is because you actually think that real transformational change is possible through doing it. And you actually think like, no, I actually think I can, like, that this can grip and can win people over and transform them. And then all of a sudden, then the posture becomes, I'm not trying to be a blip. Like, I'm trying to do something that will change the whole framework of how people are living, because I'm recognizing that it is a framework that is struggling, that is disoriented, doesn't know where to go or what to do.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where it's like, in recognizing that, it's like, no, yeah, all right, let's go after it. Let's just actually go after it.
And what you're describing is just in real time. I'm recognizing as the entire as an engine of institutional crisis. The status quo is, even when people go to start new things, new companies, and new inventions, new
ways of living.
The institutional pull is towards the center of business as usual, and you got to be a very courageous person, whether you're getting involved in politics or business or whatever, education, anything, whatever you're getting involved in. You have to be a certain type of person to fight that institutional pull, that core, that magnetic core, sort of core of whatever has already been, to say something that's new and novel, and then fight through to be able to win that, or even to stay in the fight. Like what I'm doing in the Republican Party. I don't want to talk about the school, but just my example in the Republican Party is something like, and I've said this many times on the show, and I definitely said every time I go speak, which technically speaking, some would say I shouldn't be doing. My stump speech shouldn't be trying to transform. It should be trying to win votes, right? It should be trying to massage the constituency, create coalitions so I can get the biggest pool of voters. And this is how people would prescribe I go about general elections. And my whole thing is, if you want your political leaders to just be, insurance salesmen, then don't be surprised when you get insurance scam, top-down insurance scam.
Yeah.
It's just like that's what you asked for. But
yeah.
So one thing I'm trying to get the Republican Party to understand, I said this on a podcast recently, a group called Action for Liberty, who I really like. But one thing I said to the host, Jake Duesenberg, is a huge part of the conservative movement has been this thought and narrative about the nuclear family, the problem that crime has on the society, and it usually devolves down into a critique of the black community or criminality in general and these sort of things.
Sure.
And this is what you'll see a lot on Fox News or it's look at these 15 black kids stealing out of this department store. It's a sign that the country's coming apart, and it is a sign that the country's coming apart. But I said, if I took every young black man in the history of this country and I added together everything they've stolen from each other, a department store, a credit union, it wouldn't come close to $37 trillion.
Yeah.
Not even remotely close, actually. And the point I'm making there is that in the Republican Party, at least, it is a novel but dangerous endeavor to try and tell boomer Republican voters that Fox News has been fleecing them with the cultural wedge issue, when really, and Lyndon B. Johnson allegedly said this on the record, if you take the lowest white man and you make him believe that he's higher than the highest black man, you can steal his money. You can steal his tax money. And the Republican Party has become an example of that, where your average, hardworking, kind of, I'd say, more morally grounded American citizen in the Republican Party from the boomer generation looks at these elections and goes, or politics in general and goes, well, man, I sure don't like that Ilhan Omar is facilitating some Somali immigrants, robbing some unbeknownst, yuppie biker in the uptown area.
Yeah.
But I don't care that I care, but I don't really care that Mitt Romney is helping Mitch McConnell steal our money and send it to Ukraine. Right? I mean, and to people, when you even frame it that way, some people go, well, two things can be true at once. No, actually not. Because if your moral hierarchy is, I have a problem with lying and theft and a lack of moral and ethical clarity, then like we were talking about earlier, the higher you get, the bigger the collateral damage.
Yeah.
Right? So, but, that's just one example of when you try and say something that's novel and you have to have that courage to fight through, it's not about whether or not you're successful. It can't be.
Yeah.
Because normally if you're taking on something big enough, the chances are it's not going to be successful. Like,
I mean,
Michael Jordan, I take the game-winning shot, I'm going to miss more than I make.
Yeah, they would have. I mean, they're right there. They're aligned with Peter to Christ. How are you going to go there? Don't go to Jerusalem, right? If they're going to kill you, no, don't go there. Like, you got to be worried about winning. We got more people who need to meet you. We got we got more seeds to plant.
Right.
And hey, get behind me, Satan. Like, he identifies what he's saying with the evil one, right? And one thought that came up when you're talking about, black crime and things like this is like, and what's the conservative answer? There's nothing to it, but what's it been pigeonholed into? The nuclear family.
Right.
They're saying, okay, well, we need a mother and a father, and you go, okay, all right. And then we look at other cultures where they're more stable in marriage at this time in history, because it's not a static thing across time. And so we look at, okay, so is the nuclear family a sufficient answer to this? It may very well be one of the pieces of the puzzle, but we know that nuclear families
did better at certain times in history, and we still had the
But not
same
only that,
problem.
but
yeah.
we know nowadays that nuclear families are the sources of the highest rates of depression, of the highest rates of suicide. If you look at suicides, if you look at homicide, it might come from a breakdown of a nuclear family. If you look at suicides, then you'd have
opposite.
to correlate that to nuclear families, that there's a piece missing. And I say this because it's like, obviously, I mean, I'm Catholic as they come. The family is the social cell of society. It's not the individual, it is the family. But within that concept, I have very particular conceptions of what the family is. They're not giving you particular conceptions of the family. They're just saying, hey, mom and dad, throw them together. If they're miserable, it doesn't matter. Throw them together and we're good. And they're going, well, okay, hold on. My thing is, wait a second.
AJ's about to go off, guys.
Not only is that worth scrutinizing, but let's also look at the reality, just a practical, on-the-ground reality of movement and travel and things like that. How much interaction are people getting with things that are not their nuclear family, right?
More.
So much,
Yeah.
and so much more than in history. So if we don't have the things around it at all in place, at all dealing from principle, I just don't see that as affecting the transformation that they think it's going to affect.
Yeah.
And it's very convenient to make it really bite-sized. And then what does that do also? It engenders in people a false pride because they go, oh, well, I've got a nuclear family, so I'm doing good. I don't need, right? That's Christ. I came for sinners, not the righteous.
Yes. Well,
and they're like, well, I'm righteous. I got a nuclear family.
I mean,
good.
it's
not
exactly what
bad, but
it is. And again, I'm not saying if you're married and you have a family is bad, but what I am saying is if you use that as a sort of a shield or a cloaking device or even a self-deception to indulge in other unrighteous things, culturally, individually, communally, whatever it is, then it does become a bad thing. Then you're actually it's a sort of it's a blasphemy. It's actually taking the name of your family in vain, the same way you could use the Lord's name in vain, right? It's like, oh well, I love Christ, so let me go forth and kill. It's like, okay, well, you put that on trial, right? Yeah. Real quick. But you find that in the Republican Party or in the conservative movement, all across the country is people who are married and they tend to be susceptible to politicians who are married. And you'll even hear people actually say, well, are you married? Do you have kids? Okay, that's going to help you. Okay, that's going to help you with the average Republican voter. Yeah. And right when I hear it, I go, I just bite down. I'm like, there's a lie in there. I mean, this is the
I think
there is a prototype of the politician where Mitt Romney, and I said this on the podcast, I go, in my opinion, most of the biggest assholes in our society that have done the most damage, or let's say done the things that have caused the most collateral damage institutionally, have come from two-parent households. And if you look at, let's say, your traditional Ivy League elite who becomes a D.C. politician or operative or a high-powered corporate CEO, most times they come from two-parent households from two college-educated parents, right?
Yep.
And then they, so the same things that they dictated success for young black people, because we don't have it en masse, right? A young black man doesn't have a great chance of having that, graduate degree or master's in college. But then you also have to take into account that a lot of the people who ruined our society had those things.
Right.
And that has to be accounted for. I don't think we do a good job of that.
And here's, before people want to fly in and accuse me or you, and I won't speak for you here, but of being against marriage, of course, I think marriage is pivotal,
of course,
fundamental. I'd say one distinction I'd probably throw your way, or two, actually. One is, of course, as people would say, correlation isn't causation, right? So you have people coming from that. Does that mean that thing caused it? No, but where I would say causation comes into play is that a marriage that is set up on selfish principles, and that's way more likely than a marriage that is referring itself to an authority and a rule that stands outside of itself, namely, like the church, the saints. These people have lived it out. If you do not subject it to a rule like that, you will find curses bleed throughout it. So the same thing that's meant to be life-giving. Now, we can look at it and we can go, and Christ actually hits on this. Okay, you have the crops growing up and the weeds are growing up with it, and they go, Master, sir, should we take it and torch the crop? And he goes, no, let it grow to fruition. And at the end, we will separate the weeds from the wheat. So we know that the answer is still to encourage marriage, but even more, it's to have the clarity of what those principles are that will create good marriage and good family to communal relation, like the relating of it. And part of that role for a family is not to say, okay, well, I'm just going to isolate myself. I'm going to do my family and that's it. It's saying, okay, yes, I'm going to live out these principles in my family that are self-denying, that refer to Scripture, to God, to these things, to what the church has taught, that we can trust. The saints have taught that we can trust about how to orient our love toward one another, our intimacy toward one another, right? We're going to use those things. And now we want this to bleed out into more and more things, because what we want is for principle to reign in our communities. And that's the thing, right? So we don't want to say, I would say, we don't want to say family doesn't matter, that it's not a key thing. It's saying if you isolate that thing and abstract it from its principles, now you've done something manipulative. Now you've distorted this thing. And now you've wedged a false pride onto those who congratulate themselves for that standard, and a false persecution on those who aren't.
Yeah.
Right? And what you want to be saying is, hey, there's real things that matter, right? It is the case that a child desires and needs and has a right to their mother and father.
Right.
That is the case, right? Because they didn't create themselves.
Right.
So that is the case, right? But if you think that that means that a parent who's totally detached or totally ideologically consumed by secularism, by atheism, by consumerism, by individualism, that they will simultaneously be bringing that child up. I mean, that's where they say, the sins of the father are not passed on to the child directly, but indirectly by habit. So the habits our parents have, the vices they have, we're more likely to get because we're disposed to it. We aren't burdened with it. We don't have them, but we're more likely to get it.
Right.
And that's where it's like, that's where you can just see the mechanism that's done with that to keep it away from, and then they'll throw in the false equivocations. Well, Ukraine or the government doing stuff, it's different. It's like, no, in many ways, it's more serious. It actually is. It actually is. Certain things are more serious than other things. Bodily sins are less serious than spiritual sins, right? And I and my friends, and you know it, I work really hard on bodily sins, on trying to do really well with them, and building momentum in that, and developing the virtue. And yet, it's not close to the spiritual sins of envy, wrath, pride, right? The things, sloth, the things that move you away from deference to God, from study, from the habits, from building those things out, right? So we have to be aware of, again, both things. Yep, both things can be true. And when both things are true, you have to put them in right order. If two things are true, they're not equally true. So if two things are true, they have an ordering to them.
All things do.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, okay, we have to cut through that. And what we have to put on offer is a totally new mind toward living. I'll dovetail it with this, because I asked you, what things inspire you and those people that you look up to. And I'll share people. I've shared it with you before, but the person who I'm most inspired by is Bishop Athanasius Schneider. He grew up in Soviet Russia, and the persecuted church, was underground. He's a bishop of the church. He speaks very courageously about things. But I'll tell you, and it's the courage, like you said, that's so inspiring. But the virtue that I see in Bishop Athanasius Schneider, that I see in some other people too, where it's so moving to me, is they don't have the vice that was traditionally called respect of persons. This was considered a vice. Not like, hey, I'm respectful to people, but rather you covet social rank. And who do you who do you associate with?
Mm.
What's really common now, and you get it on the political side, I get it on the starting up a school side and other things I've faced is, hey, be wary of who you associate with. It's another one of these fear things where they're like, we'll clamp down on it. And what I see in a Bishop Athanasius Schneider is a person of such composure, but what he does is he doesn't have that. He doesn't care who he's talking to or where he's talking or what their rank is or what people will say about him because of who he's talking with. He brings the truth. And that to me is the thing that moves me. It's the thing that I most desire. Because whatever moves us the most, we'll strive toward replicating that. Maybe imperfectly, but we'll strive toward replicating that. And if someone is wondering what makes AJ tick, what makes Royce tick, you learn it by realizing Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, what's the commonality between them? It's like you articulated. This sort of courage and a willingness to keep going, even though people are saying, hey, you're not fitting enough to be in that role or to do that thing, or what about this fault? And you keep going, right? So then you see like, oh, dang, I see it now. Royce is modeling that. He is living that out. It's the same thing with me. What moves you? Well, I'm really moved by this lack of that vice of respect of persons, of sort of social rank and social climbing. So when people say, well, how are you, don't associate with that, or don't associate with this person, or make sure you talk about these things. First off, 60 Minutes isn't calling.
Right.
They're not waiting on the slot to give me an interview so that I can go to the most storied ones. And frankly, if I did, they wouldn't do it in a way that tries to portray me as anything good whatsoever. Right?
You'd be a Christo nationalist.
Yeah. I don't need, you know what I mean? It wouldn't be good for my health. It wouldn't be good for any message. It wouldn't be anything in between. Nothing. They're not doing that, right? It'd be one thing if, and I honestly think about this often, but if media outlets, whoever they are, if they were local ones, Star Tribune, if they're national ones, New York Times or international ones, right? I often think the interview where they're meeting with you and then cutting things up is so foolish and pointless an endeavor. But, and here's what's real. Any one of those people, if you want to sit down and let the camera roll and us have a conversation, be happy to do it. Because no matter who you are, no matter where you're coming from, you can quickly probe to a mind where it has, oh, hey, interesting. I'm intrigued by you asking me that question. Tell me some of your thoughts in this realm. What do you think our struggles are? Right now, all of a sudden, you're not. Well. Hey, hold on. I'm the interviewer. I ask questions. No, but this is how a conversation works.
A real one.
This is how two humans relate to each other, right? And this is how. So to me, it's. What do you think our major problems that we're facing are? Because by the way, even if they articulate those, and I go, yeah, I think they're different, I can now relate to you better. Hey, what things are you inspired by?
Yeah.
Like what in the people that you look up to, what do you like about them? There's a lot of people that would be inspired by Barack Obama, and most of them, when they talk about what do they like about him? Man, he seems to have this composure, this charisma. Okay, so then is that the thing that you're trying to model in your life? Probably. It matters what you aspire to, what you're inspired by, what you aspire to, And so for me, it's like I'm inspired by the people that are like, I don't care. It's the sacrifice. It comes back to sacrifice. It's just another dimension of sacrifice.
Yeah.
I don't care that people will use this as the occasion for canceling me and then ratifying the fact that they canceled me and then canceling me again. It's sad, but it's like, that's actually what, to me, sacrifice under that aspect looks like. And that to me is the one that, tears came to me when I realized that that's Christ to all of us. If he was waiting on us to be right and fitting for God to condescend down from his throne, to come down from his throne and commune with us, would still be waiting.
Right.
He would never come.
Right.
But he comes and he enters into what is our actual weakness, our actual sin. And that's why when the Pharisees are like, look who he dines with, it's not even a blip on the radar for him.
Well, two things. One, I wanted to say.
It's just easy.
Two things. One, I wanted to say when you, there's a reason why the mainstream media won't interview me anymore, because the few times that they did during the last campaign.
You just videotaped the whole thing.
I recorded the audio or I videotaped the whole thing. and they do not like that,
No.
which is a clear indictment of their duplicity, right? They're duplicitous, and yeah, I mean, the mainstream media is definitely terrified of interviewing me because they know I will do it. I mean, I'm going to do it. They know I'm going to do
for
it.
sure.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Every time I'm interviewed by any mainstream media outlet from now on, the whole thing is getting filmed, whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
And
the next layer is just to say, hey, let's just not even do that charade. Just come on into the studio.
Yeah.
You're a journalist. You're an interviewer. You can pick my brain.
Yeah.
You can
Come on,
have a
you come sit
conversation
down
with
on the-
me.
Please call me.
You
crazy.
can write whatever you want because you're going to write whatever you want anyways after the fact
Right.
about all this stuff. And they'll probably even, when they finally write the piece, they'll say, you start to see why he's so compelling because when you talk to him, you're like, oh, he's very human. He's very good at meeting where you are. They'll map you out to be a groomer, a predator or something, but it's like, ultimately you're like, yeah, all that actually says is that I relate to people.
Right.
Right. And it's like, yeah,
like they said
I'll
this-
have a conversation with you.
They said
like,
this about me during the process in the party. They go, well, Royce has definitely struck a chord with what they call the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, and that's how he was endorsed because he's just like, those are the everyday people.
Yeah.
Or some, at least there's some of the everyday people that you guys have forgotten about. But another thing you said was, you were saying about the courage piece, and it just dawned on me, like, in the Republican Party, for example, because it has such a heavy Christian influence, and I want to touch on this before we talk about the school, it really does start to feel like the Christian expectation within politics is something like, if you're not Christ and you're not, then why would you run for office? It's like that's the
do
standard.
you guys realize none of us are Christ?
And seriously, it's the standard. It's like, in the last election, for example, I think Taylor Rahm was brought under some scrutiny and he was the more MAGA candidate, more populist nationalist candidate down in CD2, where Angie Craig is the Democrat representative now. She won, and Joe Tayrab was put up by Tom Emmer, and he was given a war chest of money. I think they raised him $1 million from some PACs and things like that. So he was the establishment guy, and they brought the scrutiny against Taylor Rahm on a Christian basis that I think he, as an attorney, represented somebody who had pedophile claims, was accused of. And it's just like, well, first of all, our justice system demands that this man be able to have legal representation.
Yeah.
Even if, we're reprehended by the accusation itself, because we don't know it to be true. And we gotta, and our American citizenship demands, and we put that principle first, that he deserves a day in court. I mean, and I would even argue, if you catch the guy with a 6-year-old girl and his pants are down, in my heart, I'm saying maybe he doesn't deserve a trial. But as far as legal jurisprudence go, he still does. And if that doesn't exist, then the rule of law doesn't exist. So it's hard for me to even.
And every lawyer, by the way, when they're caught with that, every lawyer is giving counsel of like, hey, we got to strike a plea deal.
Yeah.
You're going to jail.
Right.
One way or another. Right. And that is what it is, because even the lawyers, for the most, is going to recognize, like, this isn't good. This isn't a good thing. This is not okay. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's.
But it's just funny. We want our politicians to be Christ,
but
not Christ-like. We want them to be Christ.
Yeah, not well, and
that was the criticism of Donald Trump.
But think about it.
It's like he had, infidelity. He was.
But think about it. We don't even want them to be Christ, because Christ gets accused and slandered and defamed.
Well, that's true.
Or the same thing. So actually, we don't even want him to be Christ.
Good point.
And Christ, as the Jews at the times conceived of the Messiah as a political leader who would bring them political reign and dominance of the nation of Israel. So when we say we want our political leader to be Christ, what did Christ say? My kingdom's not of this world. And then he gets killed, murdered. So we don't even want our political leader to be Christ? Because if we want our politics to affect the change we hope to have in our communities in a political way, a political, right there, operational, secular way. That's not Christ.
It's not Christian.
So we don't want Christ. We don't want him Christ-like. We just want to scrutinize until, the cows come home. And I think what's interesting too is this is what I see even more often. I think this is even more pernicious of a reality. It's way more subtle, is that everyone values courage, right? Let's just say this on broad strokes. Their instinct is yeah, I want someone who's courageous.
Yeah.
What happens is all the fighting over what's going to constitute the definition of courage. So all the battles are going to be about how, well, actually, this person's not courageous. They're selfish. They're manipulative. They're this or that thing. That's where all the battles will actually be fought. Because they'll go, well, I also like courageous people. There's not people who are going, well, I don't like courage. That's not really the one for me. Rather, they're going to go, well, what you think is courage is not courage. Or what that person did is not courage. Right? And that's why it's we ultimately have to take as our standard some measure, some person or some set of principles, something we can point to that we can say, okay, this is our measure of what courage is, and we're going to gauge true courage off of that thing, off of that point, that reference point, right?
Yeah.
That rule, that standard, okay? And that's where the Christian takes Christ. And then the saints as these great further sort of examples surrounding it that fill out the picture. And that's what St. Paul says when he says, I suffer in my body those things which Christ did not. Well, wait, Christ did a fully satisfactory suffering. Yeah. But there's also just this tangible reality that Christ's suffering, Christ's, the stigmata, Christ's piercing of the hands aren't piercing my hands. So there's still things for me to suffer and for me to participate in that suffering more fully with, right? And so that's where we take that model, and now we start to build out a picture. And what does the gospel actually tell us? It's that woe to those who are liked and approved by the world. That's the gospel of Luke.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, why are they going to be approved by the world? Because their conception of courage is going to be convenient to the world. But blessed are those who are cursed by the world because they're doing the thing that Christ set as the standard. The courage that Christ models is the courage that we don't want to be the standard of courage. We're I'd rather courage looked like, me mounting this thing and getting this credit, right? We did it when we wrote our book together about sports, and we proposed this notion of anti-competitiveness. Everyone wants to be seen as competitive. A lot of people, right? A lot of people strive after that. When a lot of people strive after a thing, you don't have competitiveness and non-competitiveness. You have competitiveness and corrupted distortions of it, anti-competitiveness. What people want is to be seen as courageous without having to risk all the things that would actually make you courageous. Because if you had to risk all the things that actually make you courageous, you're going to take a lot of hits. The numbers are just real. You're going to lose a lot of things. So what people want is to be the courageous one who doesn't have to risk having their life taken. That's why Malcolm X immediately climbs the pantheon.
Yeah,
because it's oh, yeah, we could be sitting there saying Malcolm X was pseudo-courageous. And you're but dang, the dude died. And when they came with the guns and they had it, I'd be, whoa. Brother, don't do this. And boom, done. You're that's pretty savage last words. That's pretty courageous last words. St. Stephen, the first martyr in the Acts of the Apostles, right? Jesus Christ, receive my spirit. Those are good last words. Right as it's coming. Okay, I'm dying. Jesus Christ, receive my spirit. Those are good last words. That shows a man. That shows the heart. And so that's the real rub of it. It's not, well, I value courage and these other people don't value courage. It's what's your conception of courage? Because I can say a lot about what mine is, what it looks like. What do you give up? What do you risk? What do you lose? What's your conception of courage? That would be my question to the New York Times interviewer, whoever it would be. Well, let's start there. Who are you inspired by? What in their model inspires you? Let's get down to the nuts and the bolts. It might be uncomfortable, but let's pry this out. Because frankly, the deeper we go in it, there's probably actually going to be more agreement if we can articulate it. And then we can get back out to the surface and say, yeah, I guess I here's where I see that I have a different prescription for how I think things could be changed and go differently, right? And, it's like your, secular liberal university badge that says this is the approved way of thinking is foolish because it didn't even hold up to the conversation we just had.
It's actually the biggest insignia of corruption. It's like, yeah. But again, that's the heresy of democracy too. We talked about last time. It's, well, if the majority agrees, then it must be right. No, actually, all human history speaks to the contrary.
Yeah.
When the majority of people get together on a thing, they're mostly wrong.
They're mostly persecuting the one who's doing the right thing.
That's right.
They're mostly scheming some way to murder the righteous.
Speaking of the Crown of Thorns Academy, a school that you're starting on your own as a response to some of the turbulence you faced as a principal, a young principal.
Yeah, that occasions it's starting right now versus potentially having a longer stint as principal and then starting it.
Right.
But it was something that
Crown of Thorns Academy. Catholic private school.
Grades 1 through 8, all boys. And the hope is obviously to expand it, but to be all boys, to be an all boys educational model. And the idea, and my co-founder and I, his name's Colin Faust, great guy, severely wounded Marine vet, was over in Sangin, Afghanistan, the bloodiest part of the war in Afghanistan. So his battalion, and I might butcher some of the names, the military names there, but his battalion was the bloodiest battalion. They had the most deaths out of anyone in the entire campaign in Afghanistan. Because when they went into this northeast territory of Sangin, it was the most heavily armed and most strategically defended by the Afghanis. And so they had to go in there, and they had the most deaths, the most serious injuries, all these things. And while he was there, truly, truly a heroic man. He's there, and they're doing some reconnaissance. They get a firefight attack, and so the people flee. They're able to fend them off. Now they have to go examine the area and try and figure it out. And where can we go? Where can we not? You got to map out the territory. There's landmines all over the place. Kids dying playing soccer because they went into an area that had 1,000 landmines in a 2 square mile or 2 acre sort of stretch of land. These small plots just loaded with landmines and things. And this is real, right? This is where they went into. And so he goes there, and they're doing reconnaissance, and actually the person, they're sweeping the area, and the person in front of them steps over the landmine, but it doesn't go off. So if you're doing a sweep and someone walks over an area and no bomb goes off, you think, okay, we're good to go through that area. And he goes and he'll tell the story. It's amazing, but he's like, the click that he heard when he stepped on it, and it goes off, and severely wounded, blows off one of his legs. But what follows from there is even more amazing, because he was the person in their troop that had to call in. He had to call in the medvac.
Oh God!
And so now he's the one who's injured, and then the person who's secondary to do it, to call it in, suffers a breakdown, a traumatic breakdown, which is real in war, right? These things happen. And so he ends up having to be the one to call it in while he's bleeding out, facing death. He gets a Purple Heart for his efforts over there and for what he did. And he's an amazing man. But so he and I, we are like, I come from sports, he comes from military, and it's like, we're like, no, we need to do something with boys' education. We were both at St. Thomas Academy, an all-boys school, and we loved it. We were like, yeah, this has amazing potential. We want to build on this. We want to see all boys education thrive. And the literature, the research actually shows that it's incredibly needed from a young age, from the beginning. But culturally, our norm is if we have all boys schools, they're high schools, junior highs, high schools. But all the research from non-Catholic, non-conservative people is like, hey, this brain development's really different by the time they're 5 years old. The pace at which we teach reading should be different for boys from girls. The pace at which we move through these sort of core skills, which they call literacy and numeracy when they're young, should be different. And the way that we engage it should be different. And so we were like, this is this untapped market that there's this huge need. And we have the conviction for both fighting the battles to bring it about and then actually trying to bring it to bring it to a community and make it tangible. So we did that. We're doing that. We've faced a lot of hurdles. Once we announce we think we have a location, and then that falls apart. And then other things, and you just constantly have to be resourceful to bring this thing about. But what's been amazing is, a lot of people were like, I think it's kind of a decent idea, but I don't know that it'll like appeal to families. When you're a startup school, you did really well if you get 20 students in your first year. You did really well. That's nationwide. Anywhere you're a startup school, 20 students, you're doing well. And oftentimes you're trying to bank on, we've got the trust of who I am and my history and these pasts and these things like that to try and draw those 20 students to your school. And we did one LinkedIn post. We haven't even activated our marketing budget, our plan for how to market this thing. And we've had over that number already wanting to sign up. And in one day alone, we had 10 students' families reach out to us in one day in the last couple of weeks. So, and again, what it shows, which was our instinct, was like, no, parents know that their boy's education, it's not working well. And it's something structural as much as it is particular.
Yeah.
And so it's hilarious. And this is like the best thing you look for. We're getting calls from families that are like, we're really happy with the school that we're at, but it's not working for our boy or our two boys. We're really interested in this model. Because they're literally like, so you don't have people that are going, well, I hate where I'm at, and okay, fine. Thanks, we'll give it a try. We have people going, no, we're happy. This is the first thing that actually seems different than what's on offer from all the other things. And that's the point of it.
Right.
Right. And so it's drawing people just from that charism itself, which is all boys grade school. All boys grade school. Right. And the faith component is going to be the central thing because it's about the mind, how we view the world. But it's the thing that just it being all boys in grade school is compelling, right? And the faith piece is the one that makes it substantive, that makes it a place that can actually deliver transformation. And so, it's been a wild experience. But part of the reason we chose the name Crown of Thorns Academy, it was a year and a half ago, kind of stumbled across because churches and schools will name themselves after different events in Christ's life and different saints and things like that. And we're thinking about saints and, the saints that would be ideal, St. Paul, St. Thomas Aquinas, they've got tons of schools. There's tons of St. Paul academies and St. Thomas academies and things like that. And so it's like, okay, well, that's makes it tough, and, you could maybe, all right, do we go St. Joseph? Do we go, again, there's a lot of those schools. So as we thought about it more and more, we were like, all right, what are the different events in Christ's life? And one came up, which was the Crown of Thorns, which has to do with social persecution and humiliation. And we were like, dude, that's the thing for this time. Yeah, it might feel like an intense name, but it's the thing that's right over the target.
100%.
And so we were like, that's the name. And we get it from people like, whoa, that's intense. It's like, yeah, but that's what we need right now.
Yeah,
we
100%.
need people that will wear the crown of thorns,
100%.
that are not scared of the crown of thorns. We need kids, even just in the background, being habituated toward that through their lives. It's one of the hardest fears. That's why we need it front and center.
Especially right now.
Especially today.
Yeah, of all time it is.
The crown of thorns is the one of our age. We call it, we're no longer in the age of red martyrdom, which is blood, but white martyrdom, which is social persecution, professional persecution.
Yeah.
And in the Western world, it's white martyrdom. There are other parts of the world where they're still facing that red martyrdom. And that's real, and that's tragic, and that needs to be addressed, right? And we need to continue to support those people.
But in America,
and build
in the modern world,
in the Western American world, or the sort of that first tier countries, it's social persecution.
Yeah.
And so if that fear will creep in, it circles all the way back to the beginning of our discussion. Wherever the fear will creep in, that's where the devil will get a foothold. That's where the devil work to pry that. What we need is wherever we have fears, for those to try and lessen over time. And so we just looked at him. We're like, dude, that's the one, crown of thorns, right? People are going to have attacks for it being all boys because either they're in denial that our boys are struggling, and that's less likely the case, or more, they want them right where they are, right? And there's a lot of probably psychological layers to that. But either there's that, right? And okay, so it being all boys, we got to wear the crown of thorns and be willing to take the heat. And then it's thoroughly Catholic, Thomist, Aristotelian. Like, all right, we're going to get critiques there. We got to wear the crown of thorns. And then there's personal things. Well, look who you associate with. Look at what you talk about publicly. All right, there's another one. We got to wear the crown of thorns. And we got to go, what are we about? We are about a work, which is communicating Christ, communicating the worldview, helping our boys grow. We want everyone to grow. We're going to do this group. We're going to help our boys grow. And that's the mission. That's the heart of it. That's why it's exciting, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, this is a real thing. And we're like, oh, we could see that spread. Because it's a real thing in all the communities. Yeah, we're in Minnesota right now, but like, trust me, we have the things in place. We have sort of a two-tiered model of schools, ones where we can build ones up, hopefully one, build from the ground up, and then one where we have to be more mobile. And we have to, be able to come into buildings that are no longer in use so that we call it apostolic mode versus Christendom mode. We need that apostolic mode where it's the early apostles, they're scratching and clawing. We're going to do that. And these ones we can spring up in other cities and other communities where, you know what I mean? And then the Christendom mode is like, okay, now we're at the heights. This is where we hope, like, boom, we'll plop a high school. We're going to build this thing out. It's going to have all the accoutrements, all the bells and whistles.
Never
right?
trust the French.
But that's the idea. And that's where we're like, no, we don't even just see this as local or we see it national. We're like, hey, we're just bringing this. And the whole thing may fail. Definitely. What do you mean? Because it's a super hard task.
Yeah. It's like how it's supposed to be. It's not worth it if it
And so we're going to go after it. And
if it couldn't possibly fail, it'd
be weak. What are we doing?
It'd be nothing.
Then you're playing some rigged game, right? And so it's exciting. We're going after it. We're going to go after it. That's the thing. Like, we're going to go after it.
If it was going to definitely work, it wouldn't be named Crown of Thorns.
And
no school named Crown of Thorns is caught up in the surety of success.
Yes.
It's just that the whole model is, this is
if
you can say, and people got to understand, it's just like, and I don't mean to make it personal or individualize it, but people go, why are you running in Minnesota? Why are you running against Ilhan? Why would you run against Amy? Now you're running again against Tina under Governor Walz, who was vice president. Now he may get the sympathy reaction vote of the Minnesota nice electorate. And, oh, well, he didn't win the presidency, but we're going to make sure he's governor again. And all the Democrats down ticket. It's like, why do that? Why not go to a district in Oklahoma, the most MAGA state, on paper in the whole union? And there's senators and congressmen that are aging out. You go there and it's boom, it's a lock.
Yeah.
You guys don't understand. When you do it against all odds, and if you can be successful, the glory in that, and even more important, not the glory, but the transformation of it, has longer staying power.
Because guess what? That transformation proves it's God. We've talked about it. Gideon's army.
It's Donald Trump's victory.
Gideon.
Him getting saved by that assassination attempt.
Yeah.
And then winning. This is a proof of miracle.
This is in the book of Judges, one of the judges of Israel between the time of Moses and David. So they don't yet have a king. They don't have Saul yet. They don't have a kingdom. That you have the book of Judges, and one of them is Gideon.
Mm-hmm.
And Gideon amasses an army to go fight against their enemies, the Philistines, the Edomites, the people on the periphery of Israel, just causing havoc for scholars dispute whether it's about a 200-year stretch or a 400-year stretch. But either way, it's a while, right? And Gideon gets raised up as this judge, one who's going to bring judgment on their enemies. That's why they call them the judges. Deborah, Barak, Samson's the most well-known one with the good hair. Samson with the good hair. But Gideon brings this army of 30,000 Israelites, which is like, that's hitting. That's winning. He comes, he's like, all right, I'm ready to go fight against him. And God goes, no. If you bring a 30,000 person army and go win it, they're going to think you did it because of your natural ability, not because I raised you up. Here's what you're going to do. We're going to winnow this thing down. And he winnows it down until they got 300. He goes, okay, good. Now you go to war. Because when you go to war and win it, now no one will be able to say anything but that God did it. And that's why God raises up the lowly. Right?
Damn.
That's the whole key is like, now, yeah, if you don't God do it, you might not win it, but that he looks favorably on that. The one who will take that posture, because now it won't be me winning it. It'll be God's mercy working through me, in me, in these things, right? My grace is sufficient for you. That's what he says to Paul. And it's like, because Paul is the lowly one against all odds. You can't help but read Paul and his story and, the last 3 chapters of Acts, and which is a retelling of the Aeneid by St. Luke, who's just a hitter, right? You can't read that and not realize that this is the Lord working here, right? And that's the key is like, no, yeah, you're right. I could go there and get that victory and then get my 180K salary. I'm speaking about you right now. My 180K senator salary and live in DC and, get the interviews and feel like I'm moving things and maybe even scare some of the people in the Congress, because, oh man, he's a real hitter. Okay. Right. Or I can put it all on the line right here, knowing that the only way this comes about is if God intervenes and me desiring for God to intervene here. Right. That's what I want. I know being mid-30-year-olds starting up a school where we don't have the institutional backing, where we don't have the undersigning from the people in the right places. When this thing is raised, we're calling on God. We're saying, God, come here and do this.
I can see the glory in it now.
And you make it happen.
His glory.
Yeah, and if it is in God's will, then it will be done. Right? And if it's not, and by the way, it might not be, from my perspective, it might not be that this amounts to something, but it could lay the foundation for the one who he has ready to raise up. But the MO is going to be the same because it's the same from the Old Testament to the New Testament to the 2,000-year history of the church and the saints. The MO is the same. He will take what is lowly and raise it up to the greatest heights. So the thing that we try and do is we try and empty ourselves of as much as we can so that not I, but Christ can live in me. Right? That's exciting.
Man, so. I got one story for you is an example of this in my own life, and it's on the day of the primary election. I got a viewing room, a party room, right, to watch this whole thing go down. And in my mind, I'm thinking, we can't trust the tally. We can't trust it. I mean, there's just so much stuff. Yeah. Who knows what's going to happen? Who cares at this point? We did it. We went out. We preached the message, the gospel, the Constitution. We did it. We took a America First position, and I got endorsed by a neocon rhino Minnesota Republican Party. And the day
which they regretted 2 days later, but it held. But we fought for it. We held it. We had claimed the territory, and then we retained it.
Yes. Listen, if you were there on the day of that endorsement, you had to be there.
It was resounding.
It moved me to tears. It really did, because in that moment I knew it was God, right? Because it was
sure.
And even the speech that I gave, you can go back and watch the speech, and that kind of gives you a feel. But the words just kind of, I had a speech prepared, like I was going to start with this, and I got up there, and the energy in the room was so intense and so kind of corrupted. It was corrupted.
Oh, yeah.
Just from the top down. And I'm just like, okay, I'm throwing the speech. I crumple the ball up. It's like one of those moments in the movie. And the words just flow out, and the roar just boom from 2,000 delegates. And I get the endorsement, and
first ballot, right?
First ballot,
first
67%.
Vote. Yeah.
And I was shocked. And then I'm like, okay, now we're going in this primary. And so the day of the primary, I got a little tiny, modest little room at the hotel for the viewing, and we got the projector set up and the food and the people who helped on the campaign and whatnot. And there's these photographers in there, and I didn't know who they were. They done made their way in there through the grapevine. Maybe they heard, maybe somebody on my campaign told them where we were and didn't mean to, whatever. Anyway, there's a guy in there, and he's like, yeah, I'm shooting for the Star Tribune. And I go, get this guy out of here.
Yeah.
And he's like, what? And I go, yeah, no, the Star Tribune's not allowed. And so he gets on the phone and calls his editor. And he's like, yeah, Royce is saying he doesn't want the Star Tribune here. Like, as if that was going to change it by some strange way. Like he was I know he in his profession is very impressed by the Star Tribune because it's the biggest fish in the pond and he's a photographer.
Yeah.
It wasn't changing my mind one bit. The editor's like, so you mean no, the Star Tribune is out. And I was pretty rough about it. Get the fuck out of here. Seriously, you guys are communists, get the fuck out of here. And so the editor goes to X immediately and says, well, Royce White just told our photographer that he's not welcome at his watch party.
Yeah.
So I think she said when or if Royce wins this primary tonight, his face won't be on the front page of the paper tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And I go, great. And by the time, about an hour or two, they had already called the primary. And I remember posting this moment from Troy, where Achilles is there and he's against a 6'9", just muscle-bound, champion and he's just, and he takes that run, when nobody else wanted to face the guy. The little kid comes to him in the tent, he goes, he's the biggest man I've ever seen, and I wouldn't want to face him. And Achilles goes, that's why nobody will ever remember your name. Now, that time it was more for his individual glory, but it's the same principle. It's
look at what David does with Goliath.
I was just going to say about David. It's the same story. He goes and
You're scared of this uncircumcised Philistine?
I'm going to go take his head.
Yeah.
And he won. And the reaction from that was inspiring.
Yeah.
Was godly, where it's not me. It's just the willingness to give over and say, hey, like you said, the crown of thorns. I don't care about the Star Tribune's approval. I don't care about having my picture in the paper. Most people do this to have their picture hopefully on the front page of the paper. And that's what they're getting off on. I'm like, dude, my picture's been on the front page of the paper since I was 17.
Yeah.
I don't care about that. That's not why I'm getting into politics.
And by the way, they're not going to put my picture. What people really want is the picture along with the glowing praise.
Right.
The adulation. The
young political superstar Royce White wins.
What they want is to be memorialized.
That's right.
And what you've seen through and realized is there's no memorial coming for me from them. It's not ever going to be there. This picture, when you put it on the front of the page, because you're still going to find a reason to put it on the front of the page at one day or another over this next, couple months, as they did, it's not going to be able to memorialize me.
Right.
It's going to be to tarnish me and to slander me and to defame me, right? And to detract. Detraction's the sin where you say things that are true about a person. You guys are going to lay out all the things that I have failed in, which, by the way, is considered a damnable sin. We don't have to say moral sin, damnable, right? To do that to someone, even to take the things they truly did and use it to injure them, to unjust injure them, their reputation, right? It's like there's some leeway when someone's a public figure. I get that. But you look at it and you're going, oh, there's no leeway for slander, which is when they take things that aren't true.
Right.
There's no leeway for that. And now you have it and you're like, no, if you guys, maybe if they had been on the papers since they were 17 years old, they would understand how you can get memorialized and it doesn't actually stick. And then you can get lambasted.
Yeah, maligned.
And neither of them.
They don't stick.
Mean nothing.
They mean nothing.
And so.
But I only bring that up because it was so interesting. When you say the crown of thorns and being able to take that scrutiny, it's so interesting that in real time, I got a chance to see how many people resonated with my shunning of the paper.
Yeah.
And that my shunning of that sort of superficial glory.
Yeah.
But then how many people are indoctrinated with that. Like you don't want your face on the front of the paper.
Yeah.
Like this is how bad. This is a bad candidate. This is how candidates lose elections because he doesn't take the free publicity of being on the front of the paper.
We were just about to memorialize you. Lie. We were just going to memorialize you, and you didn't even want it. You have no chance of winning. Lie. You were not going to
memorialize me.
You were gonna take me, exhaling, like looking like a blowfish or something. You were gonna find some version of it, or me pointing at something and blah blah, and how this is proof that this guy is. You're gonna paint me as a dictator.
Yeah.
You were going to find it. I don't even know. It's like you put a camera on someone, then slow it down frame by frame. I don't want to know what images
exactly what they did, though.
They'll have your eyes like closed in a blink and be like, look at this dude just tossed. He's just drunk on the night of it. I don't drink, but.
This is exactly what they did, though. What they did was say this overwhelming victory that was against the establishment, the Norm Coleman. I mean, Norm Coleman is a political stalwart. He's a political icon in a sense for Minnesota at least, but really the whole country. I mean, there's only been a handful of U.S. senators in American history. It's like,
right.
He was one of them, and same for governors, Tim Pawlenty. I mean, these people are Republican royalty in a sense, and they come out against me, and I win a primary anyway, which doesn't speak to me. It just speaks to the fact that your average Minnesota Republicans, like, we see what they have been doing.
Yeah.
Right?
And what it is, it's a breakdown of the rubber stamping.
Yes.
The rubber
100%.
stamping was carrying weight, and then they all run up. And by the way, most politicians are afraid of that because one of the things they want through their political influence is to have actual influence.
Yes.
So people will get hesitant about that too, or they'll overplay the hand. They'll rubber stamp this person as good or bad. It's happened to Trump a few times too, where he goes, I'm going to rubber stamp it, and then the person loses. And there's this like moment where you come face to face with your own mortality, your own frailty, which is like, oh, dang, I actually couldn't move that.
Right.
Right. And so a lot of people are going to avoid that, but also then you have the moments where it breaks through where they're like, well, no, now I'm going to rubber stamp it. And now we're in this time in history because what we're in is a time where people are so overwhelmed by the misery, either personal or communal. And so they're looking for principle. They're fighting for it. And we want courage, and we want to know what is our conception of courage. That's what we mean. We don't just want courage. We want to know what are the principles of it. And we're all starving for that these days. And the ones who are doing that work to figure it out, to communicate it, to do those things. And I mean, for me, it's like, no, think about it. I'm going to be overseeing a grade school. We're going to have kids at every single step along the way, and we're going to show how the human mind adapts and meets every single one, right? When you're 6, 7, 8 years old, it's through play, it's through clarity, it's through repetition and participation and presence, right? And some people say, well, wait, but I hear you talk to Royce. That's not a conversation for a 6-year-old. It's like, no, it doesn't need to be. But guess what? I have kids. And people see me with my kids. I play with my kids because that's what I love doing. I'm just, both of us, we're goofballs at heart in so many ways.
Yeah.
We still could probably pull out the Dragon Ball Z video game, Budokai Tenkaichi 2.
Yeah.
And go at it. You know what I mean? Well, my fingers would be a little rusty.
Yeah.
On the buttons. But
mine too.
But, it's like,
wouldn't take long.
It's not hard for me. One of my favorite things about having kids is I get to go to amusement parks without any shame.
Right.
Anymore. It's amazing. I get to ride on all the rides. And the funny part is my body can't even like orient to it like it used to. It's like kids, they'll spin around till they get dizzy, fall on the ground for fun. And me, I'm like on the little spinny wheel thing, and you're like, all right, I think I'm getting sick. Like I can't even handle these rides aren't even fun to me anymore. But it's like, all right, I had to figure it out.
Oh,
so
man.
it's like
I'm done with the rides. I got to be honest.
I know. No, honestly, I can't even go on them anymore.
I
but it's
can't
like,
do it.
But that's the idea. Is like, no, people think, well, now we're gonna carve you into this territory. Hey, we'll just put the crown of thorns on again.
Yeah.
Because that's not real. What's real is the human contact at each moment along the way.
What brother Royce is going to offer to the Crown of Thorns Academy is there any way that the physical education can incorporate the martial arts? Oh, I'd love to see these little these little Catholic warriors, these little Catholic scholars learning some jujitsu.
Absolutely.
Oh, learning some like.
Because not only, so here's, you can go to our website. I think it's a sweet website. I think we built it out well. It's called crownofthornsacademy.com. But we have our pillars, our curriculum pillars. This is a curriculum totally and intentionally modeled for boys. And we got this classical component, and we can explain to you guys what that's kind of about. But then we've got this competition pillar. So boys can go at it with each other and under different aspects. Quiz bowls, spelling bees, chess matches, wrestling matches, physical, endurance feats, team sports. Like,
man, I want to go to this school.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is like literally like, and by the way, this isn't just our own invention. The all boys school out on the East Coast have modeled this and demonstrated. There's like good research that actually shows how effective this is. Yeah. And so, you know me, I was like, oh, we're just going to add more dimensions. Chess tournament. We're going to do all the different, so that we have this competition aspect because it's really good for boys. And the data shows it actually demotivates girls. So that's why your schools don't do them. Right. That's why your local public school, your watering hole or your private school, they don't do it.
Boys and girls are different.
Because they're different. They respond to it. They respond to different, and they respond to motivation different. So literally, like, whether they will do things if unmotivated is different. Okay, so first pillar, classical. Second pillar, competition. Third pillar, physical activity. That's a pillar for us. That's not like,
Amen.
So we're 3 out of every 4 days, they've got an hour of Phi Ed class, and that's not even the end of it. We're mixing it into all of it. And the way I view it is, right, we want structured playtime. We want free playtime. So that's like, structured playtime is in the classroom. Free playtime is like recess. And then we want Phi Ed time to be something more like exertion, more like training, physical training. But now here's the thing. If you have a school where you don't have any of those other forms of play, and then you have Phi Ed, you need Phi Ed to encompass all the other forms. So you need game, like, it'll be demoralizing to kids. Yeah. But when you have those other pieces so robust, then you bring that physical training. And now we're talking about stuff like that. That's what we want, is we want it to be twofold. One, we want it to be all those little skills: exertion, fatigue, training, strength, martial arts, sports skill. Right? We want it to be that layout. But then the other thing is, when you get into middle school and now you have the health component typically with it, that's standard, right? Well, now our health component of Phi Ed is going to be learning about sport and competition and mental, emotional balance, competitiveness in life, right? We're going to, most times in health class, that's where they do their quasi-sexual ethics. Right. They teach them, no, hold on. That's not.
They never teach kids about fasting, though.
Yeah, that's not for that. No. And what we need is, in that component, we need to be reading the samurais, the samurai literature. Yeah. Right? The Book of Five Rings.
Ooh, it's a classic.
Right? Yeah. We got to pick the Art of War.
Yeah.
We got to be thinking about these things. There's great ones, Ted Williams wrote a treatise on hitting a baseball. Right? There's all these little treatises sprinkled throughout all these things. Like, that's what we're trying to steep our mind in. What's the Mamba mentality? Right? Yeah. That's what we want to be doing there, because now sports, physical activity for a middle schooler and high school will find its natural place in the intellectual life, in the life of virtue. Yeah. Right? And trust me, we cover vices. We have a virtue program that's social emotional for the lower grades, and then it's anchored in the capital vice for the middle and upper grades. The capital vice is the 7 deadly sins, as people will know them. So we're touching on sexual ethics and on gluttony, on fasting. We're touching on that. Yeah. So it's it's exciting. I mean, for us, it's like, as people know, as people know,
it's gonna be thorough.
Yeah, as people know how I think about things, we go all the way down and build out from there, right? And so we're being thoughtful, intentional. It's unconventional, We have that advantage. We're not trying to. It's guerrilla warfare. We're not marching onto the field and lining up, and we'll shoot, and then you shoot, and then we'll shoot. No, man, we're mobile, because the way we view it is like, the devil's he's not marching on the field and going, okay, I shoot, now you shoot.
Time to go to war now, guys.
Because what the war is with principalities and the powers of darkness in high places. And then it seeps into all of our lives. So we got the devil, we got the world, we got ourselves. as these things that occasion evil. And so it's like, you guys, we need that type of framing. We need that thing, and we need our joy to be really, really good, really solid. We need that foundation. We need a boy to be able to just feel like, man, I don't know, school's just kind of cool. We got competitions, we got these other things, we're learning. And the way we learn it, it's not busy work. It's like to the point, and it's like kind of intense, but like interesting, exciting, right?
Yeah.
And we build out from it. And all this stuff is like stuff that I've been doing in class. I've seen it. I've gone through the work phase where you got to workshop it and work out the kinks. And it's like, no, I'm telling you, I've seen it with 6th graders, with 4th graders, with 3rd. Oh no, we're going. It's, it's going to be fun. So that's the idea, is like, yeah, how do we totally transform? A little leaven leavens all the bread. How do we move this thing so that school takes on a whole different impetus, and where it's, where it's not just the teach, it's a transformation of the mind, of how you look at things, where now all of a sudden life can be injected into it, and that it'll change families, because I've already seen it happen with the way I do things, the way it affects families for the better, because we're saying, hey,
Glorious.
yeah, that's what it has the potential to do. Most schools probably just don't think of it like that, or they think of it, but then they fall into the same old. That's not producing that. So
I'm afraid of failure.
Yeah.
Crown of Thorns Academy.
Yeah.
The great AJ Barker, another great family and friends guest episode.
Closing shot.
Yes.
Who you got for the tournament? Is Iowa State going to do it this year?
Oh
right?
my goodness.
3 seed? Are they a 3 seed?
Iowa State.
Did they win? Did they play today? What?
I think,
I think they're today.
Look, I'll say this. I think any team in the modern era who places a heavy emphasis on defense, and I don't say this as a cliche, I really mean that the game of basketball has gone so far away from defensive-minded, oriented grit. Like my AAU team, for example, the first week of practice we've had here for the spring AAU season, Little Royce and the 14 unders, has been all defense. And I couldn't tell you how many of the most basic things about defensive principle that we learned under Thorson have gone completely by the wayside with some of these kids, training and basketball upbringing. So it stems down from the NBA and how offensive-oriented the games become. And just in general, the more skilled the players are, the more space you play in, the less you let players touch each other, the defense touch the offense or get physical, the harder it's going to be to guard really good players. I mean, you can't stop a Kevin Durant unless you can bump him a little bit. It's impossible.
What is he, maybe 190 pounds?
Yeah.
It's like, if I can't bump, and he's
7'1".
Yeah, he's 7'1",
It's hard to
190
stop.
pounds. So that's like, for your average height person, that'd be like a man being 106 pounds.
Exactly.
Right? And it's like, but I can't touch him now?
So my point is that has trickled all the way down.
And KD's amazing.
Certainly,
we
for
love
sure.
KD. He's a real one, too.
It's certainly affected the college game as well.
Yeah.
And so you see, all of the very good teams in the tournament this year are going to be guard.
How about my man Hurley at UConn? You think UConn? Because
UConn,
they've got some of that grit. At least over the last few years, they defensively had that grit.
I think he has that grit, and I think the two teams that won obviously did. I don't think that this year's UConn team, has that same grit as the two teams that won. But obviously,
sure.
Players are everything, right?
They were one seeds. They were 1 seeds and won every game by 15 points.
Sometimes you're going to have the players, sometimes you're not. But I definitely like Hurley. I really like him. I mean, he's a throwback, and people can say, "Oh, he's crazy," or this. Look, and he is a coach I would love to play for. I'll say that. And
he is a gunner.
I would just say, in general, all the teams that I think have a good shot, Iowa State being one of them, they really guard. They really defend.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with that is sometimes you just don't make shots. And,
I know.
And
it's a one-game scenario.
It tends to be the teams who are very defensive-minded sometimes will fall to a team who just gets hot. So, it's going to be interesting. Iowa State has a chance because they really guard, and I'm proud of Iowa State for, when I kind of came and transformed Iowa State from a program that had been losing to a program that started to have success, both playing but also recruiting.
Yeah, and people could think like, wait, why are you taking credit? It's like, no, check the record
Well,
book.
no, that's 100%. I mean,
documented.
That's not
This is
that's
real.
well documented.
This is real.
I was the start of this current reign of Iowa State basketball, and I'm proud because under Fred, and Fred was a more let's say he was a more he was a very unconventional offensive coach for that time.
Yeah.
Where he allowed me to play the one as a 6'8", 270-pound guy, which not very many people would even think to do, let alone let it happen the whole season, right? So the early identity of Iowa State's transformation was based on unconventional offense.
Sure.
Even though I was a very good defender, I mean, I led my
Right.
team in blocks and steals, so I was a guy who was going to guard, but that wasn't the identity of the program. And then when Steve Prohm came, we had very, very good offensive players like Georges Niang and Monte Morris. And, I mean, these dudes were so good offensively, they all went to the league from a program that still wasn't considered a power program. I mean, we were just doing well.
Who's the old boy for the Pacers?
You're talking about Tyler Halliburton.
Yes.
Another great offensive player, right?
Apologies.
Deontay Burton was very good offensively. DeAndre Kane, who didn't make it to the league but should have, he was another stellar offensive player. TJ Altenberger has brought the program to a place where the identity is defense, and I think that's the home. And like you're saying, there's a crown of thorns with that. Is everybody wants offense. So when you go to recruit, you got to tell a young kid, you come here, you got to guard, and that goes against everything he's seeing on TikTok.
Yeah.
So there's even some failure and success that comes with even taking on that identity as a program, because some players aren't going to want that pressure.
Yep.
And for them to have the success they're having, doing it that way is a real testament to his coaching and the guys down there that are playing. And I love watching them. So I think they got a chance. I do think Houston also has a chance.
Dude, I was just gonna bring up Houston.
They're gritty too.
They've been hanging around that
and
sort
Coach
of
Sampson is an old school gritty dude.
For
and
like 5
he
years.
coached me.
He
was the assistant coach in Houston for the Rockets when I was there.
Yeah, when I was in Houston at the same time.
I love
at
Coach
U of
Sampson.
H.
Yeah, I love Coach Sampson.
Briefly.
He's a good dude too, and tough throwback. So I think they have a shot.
And they've been hanging around the 1-2 seed for, it seems like a good 4 or 5 years in the tournament. They're getting toward the Elite Eight, things like that.
Duke has a shot.
Yep.
I like the kid.
Con Knuppel.
I like him.
He's
I like
something.
the kid Cooper Flagg.
Yeah.
I mean, he's but I think Duke again, and people can say what they want, but Shire and that Duke program, and even Coach K himself, politics aside, they come from a throwback mentality about the game of basketball.
Yeah.
It's funny because
you'll
see that if you ask some of these basketball figures about politics, sometimes you'll get a progressive woke answer, a more liberal answer. But if you talk to them about their
sports,
their origin story from sports and their sort of philosophical principles about sports, it'll be completely different.
It's very
principled. It's about competitiveness.
It's
it's about winning. It's about grinding. It's about being better than the next guy on each individual
It's like
drill.
natural law.
Natural law, yeah. So it's going to be an interesting tournament. I think college basketball is in a good spot. I worry about the NIL doing what it's doing to the game, but at the end of the day, it'll sort itself out. Free market usually does, and the teams who emphasize being defensive minded are going to have success.
We'll do a podcast. We'll talk about
sports,
nil and
the whole thing.
Because I'm really in the boat of like, no, nil is, we got to pass through this. Like, it's necessary. It's a matter of justice.
For sure.
You got to get
but
that.
Like
that
with
money
anything else,
but
it can mess up the game in the meantime.
No, and what's happening is, and people don't realize, I said it. I actually wrote an article a year ago. I said you're gonna see develop a juniors in hockey. There's what's called juniors.
Yeah.
So Minnesota hockey players are studs here. They're 5 stars, and they get offers to go to all the big schools and they commit, but then they go to juniors for a year or two.
Right.
It's this interim period. And I said, that's going to happen with college football, college basketball, because now the money's coming and the transfer portal's open. And these are all good principles. But the thing is that we haven't sorted this out. So one of the main things is like, you're going to see something that's more like a European model be able to emerge which is like the loaning and leasing of players.
Right.
Right now, people are breaking people off $500K nil and being like, yeah, you can just dip out and leave. People don't give money for nothing. So it's just a short amount of time until they're like, all right, I'll give you that. But if you transfer to another school, they got to buy your rights through me.
Right.
Which is how European professional soccer works.
Which the entire collegiate.
So it's not the players not getting what's being bought out. It's like, no. I'm the one who invested. You got to buy this out for me. That's how European models of sports work. And it's very free market instinctive. What's going on right now is this weird interim where you have an excess of chaos because of that lack of structure. Now,
because it's been a communist, anti-competitive professional landscape.
Yes.
Like a draft. Why would there be a draft?
I mean,
drafts are
and
so
you need
communist.
you need promotion relegation.
Come on.
You know what I mean? We need this in all our sports.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I know.
The draft is not here. I want to amend this because people will say, what do you mean that you can't have a draft? The draft is communist. Here's what's communist about the NBA draft, okay? And it is
a draft is straight up insane. Just think about it.
A draft is on face value.
I get that you guys like it. I get that you guys have fun watching your team pick their
lottery.
player.
You get to see.
It's absurd.
Okay, here's what.
Are you kidding me? Someone else just gets to decide where you go.
Here's what's so communist about the NBA draft. People are gonna go.
Yeah.
There's an epithet about the what does that have to do with? Okay, here's what it is. I'm not against the draft. I am, in principle, I am. I think the draft is stupid, but. Okay, if you want to have a draft, cool. But to let the teams who lose the most get the highest draft picks is completely
communist.
It's 100% communist to tell.
It's why you get tanking. And then they're like, oh, okay, well, we'll make a lottery and you'll have a little better odds. And that'll keep them. So when they're really bad, that'll keep them from just losing every game. And you're like, dude, I don't care. They're still losing games to get to the better odds. This isn't hard to figure out.
Come on, guys.
What you do, the second we do it, it's game over. The team owners are going to be pissing themselves. What you do is you just promotion relegation, and you will straighten out this whole competitive landscape. Not perfectly, but you talk about a one tool fix that will create a big ripple effect. Do that. You know how much teams scratch and claw to not be those bottom two teams that get relegated?
Oh man,
it is wicked out
Cutthroat.
here. You know how quickly blackballs evaporate, blackballing players. Michael Beasley would still be in the league.
Michael Beasley
Royce would be in the league.
Right there. Me and Mike Beasley. Yeah.
You immediately get that because if you're in those bottom two teams, you go, I don't care about being in the good boys club that you guys don't want this guy here because I'm staying.
Yeah. You're not going to.
And I'm going to go get that.
What they're going to start thinking is, you guys are trying to make me not have this player so you can get me out.
That's right. They're paranoid and stuff.
I'm not going.
But now they're competitive.
Yeah.
Now they're competitive.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah.
And we'll do
a whole sports podcast. You got to do that coming up here. AJ Barker, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate having you back in the studio today, brother.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Crown of Thorns Academy. What's the website?
CrownofThornsAcademy.com.
CrownofThornsAcademy.com.
Yep.
All boys grade school, K through 8.
Grade 1 through 8.
1 through 8.
Kindergarten actually is communist.
Yeah.
But
grades 1 through 8.
That's another conversation.
Catholic all boys schools. AJ Barker, great mind, great friend, and I would love to send my kid to a school like that. I really would.
Churn out a few
little
more.
Royce is going to be.
He's going to be in high school.
We have to get a couple more going, huh?
Yeah.
And get a couple more in the oven. So, we appreciate you guys' viewership and listenership today and in the future. Tomorrow morning, Real America's Voice with the great Stephen K. Bannon. Stephen K. Bannon's right after me on War Room. But the Royce White Show starting at 9 a.m. Eastern. That's 8 a.m. Central Time. We'll see you there. We're going to talk about this idea of communism and capitalism being the same at the highest levels of corruption. When you socialize the financial risk, you effectively have a socialist economy. One of those little mind benders for the people out there tomorrow morning. So make sure you tune into that. Make sure you follow AJ Barker on Substack, and we'll see you all next week. Everything's up on the bar. We're all in. We get to decide. Do you want to live on your knees Or do you want to die on your feet fighting? That's the decision you get to make now.